Thank you.
Welcome to the special session on why foreign policy matters. This is a part of our week-long Pandit Hriday Nath Kunzru Memorial Lecture Series being held by the School of International Studies. Our speaker today is Honorable Shri Hardeep Singh Puri, the Union Minister of Petroleum and Natural Gas. Shri Puri has held senior positions at the Ministries of External Affairs and Defence. He has held ambassadorial level assignments in London and Brasilia, served as permanent representative of India to the United Nations in Geneva and New York. With extensive experience in multilateral diplomacy, he served on several occasions as a member of India's delegation to the GATT, United Nations in Geneva, including as ambassador and permanent representative. He has also had long association with and specialization in trade-related matters, and served on several dispute settlement panels at GATT and WTO. Post his retirement from the Indian Foreign Service, in 2013, he joined the International Peace Institute in New York, a non-profit think tank. He is also a prolific writer. His book, Perilous Interventions, The Security Council and the Politics of Chaos, published in 2016, was reprinted thrice. He's also written on India's trade policy dilemmas and role of domestic reform. In 2019, he became the Minister of State for Housing and Urban Affairs and Civil Aviation and Minister of State for Commerce and Industry. By 2021, he became Minister of Petroleum and Natural Gas. And from 2024, he continues to hold the post of Minister. So I request our Dean, Professor Mattoo, to please felicitate Shri Puri.
This is quite heavy, sir. It's a murti of Saraswati.
You can, yeah.
Wow.
Should we take it out?
Yeah, I think this is the video. Thank you. Thank you very much.
And I request the Dean to chair the session now.
Before I request the Honorable Minister, Shri Hardeep Singh Puri, to speak and enlighten us with his views on why Indian foreign policy matters or why foreign policy matters, may I also record for the purposes of this audience, which really has specialists or budding specialists on international affairs, that there is within the last 50 to 60 years has really been a think practitioner, scholar of diplomacy, more incisive than the Honorable Minister. I have personally seen him navigate India-US relations, about which a lot is talked about today, during probably the worst days following the Cold War, when you had the most hostile Assistant Secretary for South Asia in probably the history of India-US relations, Robin Raphael. And Ambassador Minister Puri was Joint Secretary for the Americas at that time. Subsequent secretaries, hadn't it been for restricted rules of seniority and so on, the number one figure in all those lists is the Honorable Minister Hardeep Singh Puri. He's also written extensively, as Professor Preeti Singh pointed out. So it is in that avatar that we invited him to give this special address as a scholar, practitioner, intellectual of international relations. May I now have the great pleasure of inviting Shri Hardeep Singh Puri to enlighten us with his words.
Thank you, Professor. If you promise during the course of the next hour or so not to refer to me as the Honorable Minister or as Minister, I would like to situate myself in this academic setting. So let me start by thanking you, Amitabh, ranking you, Preeti, Manish, and all the other distinguished scholars or scholars in the making. I cannot think of any 1 year of my long professional life, which started at the age of 20 or 21, when I've enjoyed my professional work more than the year I spent on the teaching faculty of a Delhi University college. This is not to suggest that I've not enjoyed the other professional assignments, but there is something about the world of academia that has a quality of enrichment which I find difficult to measure in words. So let me say I feel singularly honored. Of course, if my mother had been alive, she would not have believed half the things that Amitabh has said about me, but that is more a reflection of Amitabh's affection for me rather than any qualities of a practitioner of diplomacy or scholarship that I may have acquired. Let me start by saying that I consider it a singular honor to be invited to this first of your week-long lecture series, even though I was not unaware of the fact that I would have a fully packed day because we have the Amir of Qatar here, and I somehow thought I would be included in the delegation, and it's a program which started at 9 in the morning, will continue. I have another Brazilian delegation, but I still wanted to make sure that I come and spend a little time here. Why am I so touched by your invitation? One is because anyone who's had even a nodding acquaintance with the world of diplomacy, foreign policy, security policy, is aware of the eminent position which the School of International Studies acquires or has in this. And today you're celebrating its 70th anniversary. It was formed in 1955 on the recommendations of a committee led by this eminent gentleman, Professor Kunzru. It also did many things, and I'm going to skip those, but I think the most important thing is that his advocacy, I'm talking about Professor Kunzru, his advocacy for academic engagement with global affairs was what was instrumental in also establishing the Indian Council of World Affairs at Sapru House. The subject you've given me could be dealt with in 100 different ways. Why does foreign policy matter? Or as Amitabh suggested, why does Indian foreign policy matter? Let me try and link the two. I think foreign policy matters because if you did not have foreign policy and you had merely a series of unrelated, ad hoc actions which individuals professing to be practitioners of policy, if they undertook those, you would have a mess bigger than you have at any point of time. Countries would risk isolation, economic stagnation, and vulnerability to external threats. Let me start by suggesting, for purposes of provocation, if nothing else, that at no point in our own historical evolution have we been insulated from or not influenced by what goes on around India. I can give you a few personal examples from my life, from my journey, my joining the Foreign Service, and several. I just pick on one or two random things, and I'm picking on stuff which was not known. When I was about 4 years old, my father, who was a official of the Ministry of External Affairs, he was going on his first posting, and he was posted to what was then the Yugoslavia, Belgrade. And whilst we were on the high seas, I was 4+ and my younger brother was less than 1. We got a telegram, he got a telegram diverting us from Belgrade. My father got from Belgrade to Bonn, which was the capital of the Federal Republic of Germany then. And lo and behold, somebody thought that somebody had a change of mind. No, it's not as if that. But the McCarthy era in the United States in the 50s, when you thought that there was a commie under every bed, was also actually applicable in India. And somebody had said, and I'm just giving you by way of background, I can talk about it with this thing nearly 70 years, 65, 70 years later, because these are realities of life. You are affected by what happened. Somebody had filed a report because my grandfather was an educationist, and he was both my grandfathers were educationists, and he said that this Mr. Puri's two sons, the ones they knew about, they were members of progressive writers' unions, and they were left in their leaning. So somebody in the then Intelligence Bureau turned around and said, well, don't send them to a communist country, send them elsewhere, because if they go to a communist country, so it turned out quite well actually. Instead of going to Belgrade, ended up in Bonn. But just give you an example of how things are. When I was a young probationer, language officer in Tokyo, the Japanese were negotiating a peace treaty with the Chinese. And this was the early 70s. And there were whole discussion at that point of time was on something called the anti-hegemony clause. I don't know if many of you remember this or not. In other words, after the history of China and Japan in the Second World War and the talk of the atrocities committed, when in the 70s, Japan and China were settling down to conclude a bilateral treaty. The main thing was you didn't want a hegemon or a hegemonic situation emerging. Fast forward or go back. What is the ultimate construct or the basic construct under which we conduct foreign and security policy today? And I'm going to simplify it for you from a practitioner's point of view. I think you should go back to 1945. The Second World War was still raging, and a few guys got together and said, listen, let's start worrying about what the post-war order is going to look like or what it should look like. So the San Francisco Treaty was concluded in 1945, and it set the basis for the post-war multilateral system. And I'll come to multilateralism, plurilateralism, unilateralism. If I forget, Amitabh, please remind me, because I'm developing the habits of an old man. I get straight from subjects quite easily. So, why did they behave in a particular manner? I'm just going to some behavioral aspects. Well, I'll give you a lighter instance. After the Second World War, the issue arose, where would the UN be situated in terms of its headquarters? Well, somebody wanted to make money. Please don't reflect that in your lecture, but somebody was enterprising. And he said, you can't have the headquarters on the western coast of the United States. Why? Because the main enemy was Japan. So it couldn't be in San Francisco or on the western coast because Japan was too nearby. It couldn't be in Washington, D.C. It had to be in the United States because they were the dominant power after the Second World War. It couldn't be in Washington, D.C. Why? Well, for the simple reason that you already had 100 ambassadors there. Just imagine another 100 UN ambassadors. The city would become unlivable. That was a thing. So this man came along, I think it was Rothschild. He said, the ideal place is New York. What people didn't know is that he had bought hundreds of acres of marshland, as they say in our language, aathane gaz, and he was already prepared for it. So he said, but the United Nations also had to choose why it wanted to be there. So he threw in a sop. He said, what I'll do is, I'll give you the residence of the Secretary General free. I've been to that residence, probably you have. Unassuming structure a few blocks away from the UN on a road I used to live in for some time. So he got that free. And then I'll give you land to construct that 38-story building. Oh, UN was very tempted. Nobody is making the offer. And hence New York was born as the center of the post-war multilateral system. That was the UN. And then where did the rest come from? They met in a sleepy village in New Hampshire called Bretton Woods, where the discussions primarily were between John Maynard Keynes and the American Finance Secretary, I think White. White spelled with a Y, I think. And, well, the rest of the world was there. I don't think they had much of a clue to what was going on. I'm being very brutally frank. This was a post-war architecture set out by these people, and hence were born the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. What happened after that? Well, for 70 years or so, I think it continued in that form. Amitabh mentioned my association with the International Peace Institute. Well, that was incidental. I joined the International Peace Institute because somebody said it doesn't involve any work. You just have to come and do some seminaring once or twice a week and you'll be looked after. But actually what happened is that the UN system decided to establish an international commission to see if the UN on its 70th anniversary was fit for purpose. And the chairman of that committee was a man called Kevin Rudd, whom many of us know, and I was the Secretary General of the Commission. So we selected 16 areas to see how the UN could be made fit for purpose. I mean, we almost had come to the conclusion it was not fit for purpose. So, I mean, this is a lighter vein. Don't quote me. I mean, if you do, I'm a private citizen speaking. But 2 or 3 things which struck me as being absolutely mind-boggling. And today, if you were to design a classroom or a course for any institution with a modicum of self-respect, this would be an essay on how not to do things. Who were the victors of the Second World War? They became permanent members on the Security Council. Okay, fair enough. If good has triumphed over evil, you could make the moral argument that the virtuous should be permanent members of the Security Council. But it didn't quite stop there. And then you have the Monetary Fund, and you have the thing. But I think that's what struck me, and I'm going to deviate from my conceptualization to where India comes in a little within a few minutes. What struck me as being very, very surprising, inexplicable, is that amongst the permanent members of the Security Council, there was a compact. That if I have an interest, if these 5 are permanent members, if I have an interest and I don't affect your interest, you look away. Now, why is the Security Council important? Let me fast forward from theory to practice. Because it is the only designated agency in the world today which has the capacity to make a determination on whether there exists or not a threat to peace and security. It is the only agency which can make that determination. And if it makes a determination that there is a threat to international peace and security, it is the only agency which can authorize countermeasures or such means necessary. That means taking other means necessary, which is use of force. So from the time that the Security Council came into being, I think 1945 or whenever, to the time that Security Council Resolution 1973 comes, on which my book is based. India was a member of the Council. I was presiding over the Council when it came to Libya and Syria. 2 cases of use of force, authorization or non-authorization. Libya with the authority of the Security Council, and what did it do? It unraveled the country. Security Council gave authority to use force, and the country has never woken up, never recovered after that. The case of Syria is different. After having learnt a bitter lesson in Libya, the Security Council again turned around and said, no way. We made a mistake once. Even the ones who had this thing, we are not going to touch this one. Certainly the Russians and the Chinese were not going to touch it. Others were also half-hearted. They said, no, this is. So let me now move away from this and come to why did the Security Council, and by the way, Amitabh, it's been paralyzed since then. So whatever has happened recently, I'm talking about February 22, Russia, Ukraine, all the other things, Security Council stands paralyzed, and for good reason. When you come to the International Monetary Fund and World Bank, I should be careful. We have a compatriot of mine, one of us, heading one of those institutions. But the fact is, the purpose is, well, we are very respectful, all that. But that development finance thing, despite all that we did, didn't actually or hasn't taken off in the manner that we desired. Let me briefly mention to you the Indian position, and I'm not taking a timeline which is politically convenient to me. I think India, with its civilizational heritage, with the value system that we have been practicing all along, at no time in our history has India gone in a direction other than one that is benign. I can tell you whether it was Goa in the early 60s, 62, Sri Lanka, with which I had a more active involvement. I was the first secretary, later councillor political, and I actually had the benefit of dealing with people who could either be described as colourful or in more stronger terms, like Mr. Velupillai Prabhakaran, and bringing him here. I think India has in many ways stood out. I had a slightly combative interview with a BBC journalist the other day, and he said, aren't you India? You have not condemned it. I gave him a piece of my mind. I said, if there is any country which has been consistent on issues relating to sovereignty and good international behavior, it's been India. I'm not talking about now, all along. I mean, countries which have openly espoused the use of force in order to dismember other countries cannot be telling us, and today that's what's happened. I mean, I would commend to you, I don't know what your views on this otherwise are, but I'm going to provoke you. Read President Trump's social media post after this conversation with President Putin. And I've been saying this, Amitabh, all along. Like, look, today international relations is something far longer. And I think guys like you, I'm sorry, I'm talking to you, so guys affectionately, youngsters, ladies and gentlemen, all of it, you have a historical perspective of what international relation, the value system and this practice of it is all about. What happened in the case of Libya and the Arab Spring? I mean, I couldn't believe what I was saying. I was being told by my friends, including Susan Rice, Hardeep, you don't understand. There is a yearning for democracy on the Arab street. I said, oh, sure. There's a yearning for democracy on the Arab street. Good, then let the Arab street develop democratic ways of expressing that yearning and having this thing. But the state structures were what it is, so you tried to impose democracy from outside, and a regressive state structure came in, and all hell broke loose after that. Okay. And you know that gentleman that they sent there, where was it, to Benghazi, what was his name? Ambassador, he actually, and I think Hillary Clinton has given an interview recently. He turned around and said that, she said as to why they went there. I mean, the account I heard was that he went there because he thought that a huge crowd there was going to welcome them. And the poor man ended up getting lynched. So I think international relations is not just what happens between governments or representatives at government's level. It also demands a deep study of societies, of cultures, of traditions, of what you can do in certain societies and what you cannot do. and the ability to take that forward. We said all along in the Security Council, and I keep coming back to this, saying, please do not simplify an extremely complicated situation. And by the way, if you look at the vote on the Libya resolution, I mean, some things, I didn't have enough time to do research, but some things still stick in my mind. I met my friend and compatriot, the PR of Nigeria. I said, why are you hanging around the ladies' room? Because she said, I can't show my face in and I don't want to go in till I get my instructions. And I said, how are you going to get your instructions? We had phones. He said, no, we are waiting for South Africa to take a position. I really got worried. I really got worried. I said, South Africa and Nigeria are going to still get instructions, but I thought the Indian position of an abstention was absolutely the correct one. Absolutely the correct one, because this was a choice between the devil and the deep sea. Then I got my German colleague. I must say, it was a very different. The Germans abstained along with us. Why? Because the German foreign policy understood at that point of time that this was not what it was going to be made out to be. And ultimately, please, forgive me, my purpose is not to this thing. I'm only talking about the role of behavioral psychology in international relation. My South African colleague, who was a very dear friend of mine, Baso Sanko, who later on, I think, became head of the OAU or ambassador there, I don't remember. He told me that, Hardeep, we are in a difficult position. I said, why? He said, they're telling us that after this thing unravels, it's South Africa and its pivotal position in the OAU, you would be the only ones to be able to sort this out, so you should vote for the resolution. And they went for the resolution. Anyway, the resolution went through. That's why they got use of force. I make two simplistic submissions to you. To me, they are self-evident truisms, that the multilateral system, or underneath the plurilateral system, which is the result of the post-war order in 1945, is in a severe state of disrepair. And that unless that issue is addressed, the second proposition I make is that I don't believe that simplistic reform, just this and that, will work. It's not going to work. Fact of the matter is that the world of 1945 and the world of 2025 are inherently and vastly different. Today, we have to face up to some realities. The multilateral trading system, whether you like it or not, was always weighted against the interests of developing countries. I mean, people say, what will happen if this happened? I've done several rounds of several associations or tenures there. I've had the privilege of chairing the steel panel, WTO, alcohol beverages. I was a member of the agricultural subsidies panel, pasta wars. I've done about 6, 7. The fact of the matter is that all the assurances or safeguards that you applied for developing countries in what you call special and differential treatment, which are a series of nice sounding things under Article 37, they're all best endeavor clauses. They're not justiciable in terms of the dispute settlement clause. So the point I'm making is that developing countries have in any case got a, how do you put it, they've been shortchanged in that. Today, if a newly elected president in the world's largest economy decides to enforce some of these recipes, in any case the WTO is, the appellate body is not functioning, but you will have to cruise that. So the second submission I'm making, one is it's in discipline, second, that the way to go about it is to persist, persevere, and get it back. Countries withdraw from agencies as they did in the first term, and then they come back, etc. But the stable, benign, and consistent contribution of countries like India. By the way, you can look at an Indian record going back many years. But after 2014 it's become more pronounced. Today, India is willing to assume the load of helping others. I was in discussions which the Prime Minister was having with the visiting Amir. And, some of the things he said was fitting in here. How many countries did we assist on vaccines? Vaccine Maitri. What are we doing today in terms of, not here, but in India Energy Week last year, in terms of global replicability in the global south of things that we have done in India? For instance, 2.8 billion people in the world don't have clean cooking fuel. Today in India, for a family of Labhartis or beneficiaries under the Ujjwala scheme, we can supply gas at 5 rupees a day. If you add that to the fact that we are giving 80 crore people 3 meals of dry ration still in a day, I mean, it's an example which is where the facts stare you in the face. But even for non-beneficiaries of the Ujjwala scheme, we are providing gas in a day for 15, 16 rupees a day. The number of gas connections in India in 2014 was 14 crores or 140 million. Today there are 33 crores plus. If one connection serves 4 people, then 33 into 4, we've got the entire population. But more than that, we are laying a gas pipeline. I'm just mentioning some example. Which other country in the world has grown from, well, if you're Cambridge historians and their work is to be believed, India's contribution to global GDP was 25% in the year 1700. Along comes 190 years of colonial domination from 1757, and you go into a slide. Today we are the 10th largest. We are the 5th largest economy, having come from 10th largest in 2014. We are going from there to 4th largest, I think, at this rate within the next month or two, and the 3rd largest by 2027. But your movement from 4 to 7 to $10 trillion economy. Does this in any phase change our basic orientation to what you say foreign policy? I don't think so. If we have, and many people will suggest, oh, your neighborhood first is not, you got problem. I'm pretty clinical, I'm equally critical of what we do. I think there is a change taking place. When I was an international civil servant, and we were looking at China's resumption of full membership of the multilateral trading system, and I was witness to many of my colleagues from the Western industrial democracies in a working party which was established to see or to facilitate China's resumption. They were salivating at the prospect of a huge market becoming open to their manufactured products. I was one of the few who said, hey, wait a minute. What happens if that market in turn becomes a manufacturing powerhouse and what happened, Amitabh, is one and the other. I think more the other than the one. Today, I can tell you, what happens in foreign policy or in foreign countries affects you in things that you can't even visualize. My favorite example is 50% of our GDP, and I mean this seriously, 50% of our GDP is in the external sector, which means the value of goods imported and exported and the value of remittances. So for me to pretend that I can carry out my domestic economic growth rates without being affected by what happens in large parts of Europe, the United States, Africa, Latin America is, I think, delusional. And we can behave in a delusional way. So not all my colleagues agree with me. Not many people in your academia will agree. They will say, go entirely, on your own. No, you're not. You shifted many or so-called polluting industries out of your country because you thought they were polluting, and then they became, and other countries are willing to take them. I mean, I think, what are they called? Active pharmaceutical ingredients is a case in point. And then when something goes wrong somewhere, you start worrying about, disruption in supply chains. Today, with an economy which is, by global standards, booming, I am dependent 85% on imported oil. Even though gas is, we are doing better, we increase our production by 18% a year. The fact of the matter is, I'm still dependent 55% on imported gas. So I think why foreign policy matters is quite easy to address for the simple reason that anyone suggesting the contrary would need to have his or her mental faculties examined. But how to go about that challenge, that I believe is something, and I am not saying this out of the 39 years that I was a member of the Foreign Service. I'm not saying it out of loyalty to them or to the, by and large, throughout this period, the limited number of people that have been entrusted with that and the political leadership of the country, particularly now, has got it right. I can just conclude with one or two things, and then I'd be happy to have you guys take a pot shot at what I've said. But I believe that for a country of our size, the size of our foreign service is very, very small. Because I don't think domestically we've got over this hang-up of, that domestic administration is very, no, it is. Domestic administration, revenue administration, the IAS, they're very important. But I'm saying that all of it is interlinked. You mentioned my ambassadorial assignments. I just so happen to have been ambassador in New York and Geneva longer than, let's say, in London and in Brazil. But Brazil is a country where every government department, every government ministry has a foreign policy person attached to it. And it's not that the foreign service establishment wants to enlarge the number of people. There's some benefit can come. For instance, in the 8 years that I've been a minister, I have always asked for a very good lawyer to be attached to me. Because much of what I do has legal implications which I may not even understand. The choice of language I use could have. I would like to have, a very bright academic attached to me. And I'm looking around. My colleague is nodding. Because you need to be able to do some real research on a short-term basis. So I think in the years ahead, again, my concluding sentiment, foreign policy understood as both foreign economic, trade, security policy in the widest sense, for a country which has resolved to become a developed country by 2047, that will grow stronger and stronger. And you need more and more resources on that. And I also believe that centers of learning like yourselves can play, you are playing already an extraordinary role by providing inputs. I don't worry too much about the ideological orientation. Sometimes I take it with a pinch of salt, because sometimes I also think that we need to allow the abstract to filter against. One of my favorite quips in the last few days has been, in our case, we have a problem when it comes to artificial intelligence, because it's being confronted by something called natural stupidity. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir, for that brilliant address, which gave us an overview drawn from both your deep conceptual understanding as well as your rich experience. The multilateral order is in disarray. India will matter. India matters and will matter even more in the years to come, and foreign policy matters almost in an all-pervasive way. You can't construct domestic policy without understanding the world outside, and the Indian foreign policy establishment needs to grow exponentially to keep up with the role that India aspires to play in the years to come. So may I now, the Honourable Minister has been kind enough to agree to take questions, comments. Students first. Yes, the girl in the pink shirt. Identify yourself, please. And you can raise your hands, I can see them. Okay, two.
Sir, I am Janvi Jaiswal, a research scholar from Center for European Studies. Sir, as a representative of Union Cabinet, I would like to ask you, how will India navigate its foreign policy with the states from which it imports oil and gas in the light of the recent meeting of Prime Minister Modi and US President, where President Trump expressed that he looks forward to US becoming the prominent importer of oil and gas to India, probably replacing the others?
Do you want to take 2-3 questions?
Yeah, I'll take a few questions together, sure.
The gentleman with the dark blue shirtish. Yeah.
Hello, sir. My name is Prof. I am pursuing my master's PISM second year. So my question was related to India's foreign policy only. Sir, to what extent do you think that India's approach to regional diplomacy has contributed to or led to deterioration of our ties with our neighboring countries like Sri Lanka, Nepal, more recently Bangladesh? Secondly, sir, to what extent do you think India's foreign policy has majorly been reactive rather than proactive while dealing with emerging threats or issues in the Indo-Pacific region?
Okay. There was a gentleman here. Okay, the girl in the... Yeah. Okay. Oh, you wanted to ask or you wanted to say?
So my name is Garima. I am from the Center for the Study of Regional Development. So my question is that how India handled the international criticism and pressure, which was especially with regards to Russia sanctions which were made, and how we are looking forward to the non-traditional oil partners and alternatives we are searching for in our foreign policy.
Okay. No, I'll take a couple of them. Faculty. Apendaraj, I'll come to you. Don't worry. Faculty, Dr. Archana Negi. Sorry. Yeah. Roving mic.
Thank you so much, sir, for the very illustrative and illuminating address. When you were speaking especially about the UN headquarters, it reminded me that the transcripts of the Bretton Woods conference, which were discovered some years ago, there is a mention of how the location of the Bretton Woods Institution's headquarters was decided. And when John Maynard Keynes sent a message to Harry Dexter White saying that ask them to give one to us and keep one, so that one headquarter could be in US and one in UK. The response that was given by the American delegation and Harry Dexter White in particular was, because he went to his boss, who was a person called Morgenthau, and Morgenthau said, refuse them outright.
No, you use more colorful language.
Which I'm not using on the mic.
You should not. Even I was tempted to, but don't do that.
But the sum and substance of what he said was that if they had the power, they would not give us one. So let's not give them one. And that's how both of them ended up being in Washington, the World Bank and the IMF. But that's just anecdotal. I, of course, wanted to draw on your very rich experience with the WTO dispute settlement system. And as students of the WTO dispute settlement system, we've seen it go through so many phases. Now it's been in this dark phase of, what is commonly called countries having only the option of appealing into the void. Based on your experience, what is your prognosis for dispute resolution, especially given that tariff wars are on the anvil? I think I'll just...
Would you want to take these, sir?
I think I'll take these and let's see how we play for time. Can we? I've jotted it down, but can we start with the professor last and then work backwards?
Sure.
Yeah. Look, insofar as the location of the UN headquarters is concerned, there is actually a book which I remember. Suddenly it came back. It's, I think, called The Act of Creation. I probably have it, and I have one of the better libraries, so I should say that. So let me have a look at that. But this exchange you are referring to is not in that book. It's in another book. If you can give me the citation, I'd like to go through it, because I have also been told about this by somebody very knowledgeable, and Morgenthau's language was much more colorful instead of refusing that. Look, the one point I left out in my mental bullet points which I had was that in international relations and in the conduct of foreign policy, unilateralism is seldom the preference even of the very strong. Because even the very strong know that if you are very strong, you still need some kind of a structure, either bilateral, plurilateral, or multilateral. Multilateralism here being defined as everyone on board, the UN, everybody is on board. Plurilateral, smaller groupings, and bilateral, 2 and 1. The problem is that if you did not have the UN, or if you did not have the WTO now, you still have to invent one. Now, what is the essence of trade negotiation? Let's say we have 100, 150 people in this room, hypothetically. I negotiate a bilateral trade deal with you, and then we apply the most favored nation principle, and the benefits of that trade negotiation between you and me are extended to everyone else in the room who are members of the multilateral trading system. So what do you do? If I and Amitabh negotiate, say, a 20% tariff on something, and we then, everybody else becomes entitled to the 20% tariff, that's an entitlement. Now, tariffs are of two kinds. One of them is a bound rate. That is, when you and I negotiate something, or Amitabh and I negotiate something, there's a bound rate. I cannot raise it beyond that in any case. But I could have a situation where my bound rate is 60%, and I decide from 60 I can, my bound rate is lower, but my effective rate is higher. So from the effective rate, I can bring it down to bound rate. The new approach, you see, WTO dispute settlement per se, one could argue, if I were an academic, I could argue that since the time that the US pulled out of the appellate body, in effect, the dispute settlement is not functioning. I wouldn't use the word dead, it's there. So what will happen? Now, you can, as an academic, ask a question. If there is a set of multilaterally agreed rules, and you've agreed to something multilaterally, how can somebody take unilateral? So my understanding, and I talk to youngsters who have more time and who I look up to, like Mohan Kumar, for instance. I asked, we had on WhatsApp, we had to say, how is it done? And he sent me some material, and there is something called an emergency power. That is, if there's an emergency in the United States, they can invoke that for a specified period of time to do this tariff thing. What would happen? Yes, there will be dislocation. Everybody is worried about that. Will happen. I am not a master. I don't have a master's in behavioral psychology. I don't know how much of this is for leverage setting or how much of this is for actual disruption which is going to cause. With Mexico and Canada, I mean, one could argue, and maybe I shouldn't be saying this, that what has happened is exactly what was anticipated. They were willing to take those actions in any case. So you will go through a period. My sense is WTO, WHO, all that, I think those of us who are members of this system and are also beneficiaries, without worrying about how badly we've been shortchanged in the past, it becomes incumbent on us to try and save and strengthen those institutions and work in that direction. I had somebody from a UN agency coming to see me yesterday or day before. I said the same thing to him. I said, look, maybe narrative needs to change, but we need to say that. Because the system, as Amitabh says, is in a very high degree of disrepair. And there's no, I mean, I can lament it, but I need to produce something better. So insofar as the UN is concerned, there is under the charter a provision for a conference of parties when sit down. But I don't see that conference of parties taking place just now. Because the preoccupation with current matters is of such a high order that you will have to wait for that to happen. But you can't jettison something just because it's in a state of disrepair. Nothing is going to come out of it. So I think a sensible Indian approach. I mean, my Prime Minister's view on the Russia-Ukraine war is absolutely correct. He said, look, time for diplomacy, time for instruments of peace. Don't talk of war. And after I saw President Trump's message, social media post after his talk with Putin, I mean, he's saying the same thing. Basically, we were all on the same side in the Second World War, etc. So, history, I mean, international relations is about interest, both short, medium, and long term, where the long term often has to dictate what's good for us there. About Russian sanctions, I think one of you asked about it. First of all, let's be very clear. There are no sanctions on Russia. Please. I don't know where you guys are getting this from. I'm sorry. Russian oil and energy coming through a pipeline from Russia to Hungary was exempt. Russian oil and gas going through a pipeline to Japan was exempt. All that we were asked to do is buy Russian oil under a price cap. And Amitabh and I are old friends, he knows. When I'm asked to buy something cheap, I'm very happy. So 0.2% was our total, it went from there, it went to 38%. So we're not unhappy with it. Now 2 entities have been put and the shipping fleet is under this thing, so and so. But let me tell all of you who are asking questions about oil, there is a fundamental undercurrent, which is that more and more oil is coming on the international market. There has never been a shortage. I mean, prior to all this hullabaloo, we were getting 102 million barrels a day, 102 million barrels a day. OPEC did some production cuts, so they reduced it from 102 million barrels a day to 97 million barrels a day. But after all that, even with those 5 million barrels being taken off the market or production cuts, more and more oil coming on the international market from the Western Hemisphere. By the Western Hemisphere, I mean Brazil. It used to produce 3 million barrels a day. It's producing now another 140,000. Argentina, Guyana, Suriname, Canada, United States is one of the largest producers, perhaps the largest. It was producing 13 million barrels a day. Today they've decided to produce another 1.5 million barrels. So there's no shortage of oil. What is my position? My position in navigating is I'll buy from wherever I get the most effective and reasonable price. We float tenders at the point of importation. Whoever wants to sell to us delivers at our point. So I have no anxiety on that. Somebody says, aren't you feeling the pressure? I luckily work for a boss who does, mind is not wired to get pressure. Mine has not been wired in any case, so that I get double insurance. So there's no shortage of oil. There's more and more gas coming on the international market. By 2027, I think the amount of gas availability is going to go up massively. So on oil and gas, I'm going to skip that. There's no issue. Has the deterioration of ties with our neighborhood, we are responsible? I haven't heard a bigger amount of BS than that. We have nothing to do with the deterioration of our ties. First, but let me get to that. No, I'll tell you why. Because I've been in the neighborhood and I've been in Sri Lanka and I know what we try to do in Sri Lanka to bring peace. All right? But there was this issue about what is going to happen in the energy world. First of all, we ourselves had a problem. Between 2006 and 16, what I call the dull decade, the then government and for a year or two after we came in, there was no E&P, no exploration and production. as a result of which, this is a high cost, high intensity. Sometimes an offshore well costs, $100 million to drill. In Guyana, you dug 16 wells and you didn't find any oil. Then on the 17th one, you struck gold. So I've been saying, there are many Guyanas waiting to be found in the Indian Ocean, in the Andaman Sea. So today, our approach to energy is different. We've changed our law. It was passed in the Rajya Sabha. I'm hoping to get the new law enacted in the Lok Sabha early next month. We had a 1948 law which talked about, mining and quarrying, and your petroleum licenses were part of the 1948 law. We produced another one for that in 1976 or something, but it's still under the 1948 law. So we changed all that. By the way, we also went from production sharing agreements to revenue sharing agreements. We have gone, by the way, we sit down with our investors and say, hey guys, it's not the old India. Here, if you have a problem, let us know. We are willing to talk to you. We're willing to tweak our laws and make it worth your while. We have an arrangement with Petrobras of Brazil for seismic surveys in the Andaman Seas with Oil India. And we've told them, I know you don't want to make a commitment. Come and give us your expertise. We'll compensate you for your technical assistance. And if we strike gold, you'll have the right to first refusal. BP and ONGC arrangement in the Bombay High is exactly the same. So I think there is a complete sea change on energy. I see no problems on energy worldwide, and I personally don't see it in India because today, with the kind of energy coming on the world market, with the fact that our consumption has gone up in the 3.5 years I've been with the ministry, from 5 million barrels consumption per day to 5.5, it'll go up to 6. Actually, you have a purchasers, consumers leverage also, because there are not many parts of the world which are consuming so much so much energy. The International Energy Agency has predicted that in the next 2 decades, 25% of the increase in demand will come from India. And that gives you a certain leverage. On this neighboring countries thing, look, I was in Sri Lanka when the 1987 India-Sri Lanka Accord was reached. It was an act of courage by the then Prime Minister. I don't want to go into why militancy or terrorism started. I didn't want to. But I think the Indian government of that day literally stuck its neck out to try and help a neighboring country. Okay, anywhere else in the world, after having lost kitne hazar or kitne log, they would have said, all right, we go down. No, we happily came back. I'll give you one example. Insofar as Bangladesh is concerned, look, I didn't want to get into a foreign policy discussion on a practitioner so-and-so. But I think that generation which Amitabh and I remember it, it's more his and my generation. But in Bangladesh, that generation seems to have forgotten what the Indian role was. Again, we happily, extracted ourselves from that. I think it's a little premature as to whether US aid only funded voter turnout in India, or I have my friend here who will do a research paper on this year. Where did that, I'm only talking about one head, who happened, what happened, etc. But I think our role, whether it is Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Maldives, Nepal, looked at even in absolute standards, it has been one of being extremely helpful to them, bothering about their development needs, whether it's power from from Chukha, from other things. We've done that. But sometimes there is a temptation, it takes two to tango. Sometimes there is a temptation in some of them to say, we play India against X, or we play X against Y. Yeah, there was a famous Polish economist called Kalicki or something like that. He had an expression which is escaping me just now. I'll read it up.
Marxist economy. Marxist.
Yet that, you have the choice between two Udas, and so you're doing that. But believe me, in the history of a nation and the evolution of a civilization, the period that we are talking about is a very limited one. I am a firm believer that a lot of people, and I know a lot of people in all these countries, I've grown up and, they're part of my generation, they not only see the benefit of a stable relationship with India. I don't want to go into the details, what happened when Sri Lanka needed to be bailed out in terms of what we did on the energy sector, in terms of, some of them were outright grants, what we did for XYZ. Well, in the final analysis, short-term knee-jerk reactions always will pale into insignificance against medium to long-term benefits which flow from good relations with your neighborhood. And I think in this South Asia, and we've had problems in the past. Some of our sub-regional arrangements didn't work because one of our neighbors to the west, etc. That's a different relationship. But about all these others that you're talking about, it's a good sparring point in an undergraduate seminar. But on a serious discussion of foreign policy, I think we have been more than this thing, and I think the Prime Minister is committed to it. So have been his predecessors. But whatever they've done, it comes around. So I'm often asked these questions when some of us talk in this and say, "Bhai, pehle dekh to lo, how it's going to be received, how we are willing to do something." But I know in my 8 years in the in the government, I have seen whenever it comes to requests from them on at least energy or other areas I've been involved in, we've been more than forthcoming.
So how are we doing by time?
No, I think we should, because I have my next meeting at 5:30, we'll have to conclude. I'm enjoying it, but Rasal? Yes, I think my mentor
One
is...
more-
Yeah,
one
one question, one more question.
Apanya Raj will otherwise accuse me of
No,
discrimination, discrimination on multiple fronts.
discrimination stemming from...
So
No, you don't answer. Don't answer. Aap puche.
you can answer it.
Yeah, mic is not working. I just want to wish you belated birthday wishes, Minister.
Thank you very much.
And my question is on linguistic imperialism.
On?
Linguistic imperialism,
What is that?
the Hindi imposition that's happening.
Hindi where?
Foreign policy, do you think India, ministers from your government is speaking about making... ministers from your government is speaking about making Hindi as the face of India and the
Say,
world.
who said that?
I think the previous minister who just previous external affairs ministers and all that. So, but Hindi becoming the face of India has been a consistent rhetoric from India. So, how do you think Indian foreign policy circles fail to project the linguistic diversity that is present?
No, let me just tell you. First of all, I'm sorry. Maybe my mind these days is not wired on this kind of a thing. But let me just tell you, we have projected our cultural, our historical, civilizational, cultural diversity in all forms, at all points of time, all over the world. It just so happens, I think, that today a very large percentage of the country speaks a particular language, which can be in terms of numerical this thing. I don't know who said what, so I'm not going to get into that. But I can tell you that we are not only presenting our own diversity, but we are also playing up to and encouraging the diversity all around us. I mean, I can't think of a bigger emphasis, like, for instance, I'll give you my 8 years, how keen my boss was or still is on that Buddhist circuit. I give you one example. What I'm talking not only of the well-known, established, what we have done for the development of the Buddhist cultural circuit, starting from, I can cite all these places, Lumbini, Bodh Gaya, Sarnath, the whole thing. What we have done for the Sikhs. Kartarpur Sahib, this was the demand, God knows from how many years, and this Prime Minister opened it. What we are doing for Tamil Saurashtra, you know, what was his Kashi Tamil, this thing, so and so. And by the way, you know, somebody said that he was very impressed by the fact that my wife and I had spent all our lives abroad. All our lives, matlab ki, if 39 years in the foreign service meant all, and then 6 years I was you know, when I was not think tanking with my friend here, I was spending in New York. No, 39 plus 6, 45 years, long time. And I can tell you, when I went for the opening of the Faith Corridor in Varanasi, I saw more people from Telangana, from Tamil Nadu, from Andhra, from all those places. Yesterday or day before, when some of us went to the Mahakumbh, and the people who were wanting to come and, you know, talk to you, etc., were from the southern states. So all this talk about, you know, what is it, linguistic culturalism, no, cultural imperialism, तो imperialist को तो देखो क्या हो गया यार. 190 साल के बाद वो मुझसे बात कर रहा था. मैंने कहा रहा है, will you become a developed country by 2047? I was tempted to say, but I didn't. I said, I'm more worried about your becoming a third world country than my becoming a thing यार. नहीं, ये लिंग्विस्टिक को छोड़ दो यार. ये इसके साथ कर लेना आर्ग्यूमेंट अमिताभ के साथ. मेरे साथ आके गपशप लगाओ, मैं बताऊंगा तुम्हें. अरे यार उसको छोड़े यार. मराठी का तो है, मराठी आई मैरिड टू महाराष्ट्रियन, तो वो भी है कल्चरली, वो भी थोड़ा स्ट्रॉन्ग है. बट मैं औरों का बताता हूँ यार. इट्स वेरी इंटरेस्टिंग. Recently, if you look at that, you know that we have the status of national language or क्या वो होता है, the classical languages. See whom we've given that to. Marathi is one. The other languages. So to talk of any one language, yes, numerically you can't change the fact that in Punjab we speak Punjabi. Or the overall in the country, you know, given the size of Bihar and UP. But whether it leads to imperialism, I don't know, yaar.
Now, may I ask my young colleague, Dr. Manish Dabhade, to give a formal vote of thanks.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you, Honorable Shri Puri ji.
As we decided not to.
Formal vote, sir.
Achha, okay.
For the record.
Okay.
Thank you, Honorable Shri Puri ji, for a very inspiring and illuminating address. And as Professor Mattoo was saying, it was a masterful blend of theory and practice of international relations. SIS JNU is filled with immense gratitude as you took time out of your extremely busy schedule, and I am told that you're coming from Rashtrapati Bhavan to address us all today and take questions from the students. So on behalf of the Dean, Professor Mattoo, and Professor Preeti Singh, who is the chairperson of the organizing committee of the Kunzru lecture series, and I really want to thank all our SIS colleagues, all the students, but especially the student volunteers who have been working day and night to make this program a success. Thank you so much, sir, for everything.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being so kind. Thank you.
Volunteers want a picture with you.
Yeah, sure. Come.
And we assemble at 11 AM tomorrow on Why Americas Matter.
Thank you. आ जाओ student volunteers come. Thank you. See you. जरूर आइए.
Don't miss this golden opportunity to be
Students, can the student volunteers please come up? Student volunteers.